What if the person who shows up at your door in the middle of a cold Montana evening isn't trouble, but the one thing your broken heart has been waiting for without knowing it? The autumn wind howled across the Montana plains like a wounded coyote. It scraped along the wooden porch boards and tugged at Abigail Thornfield's shawl as she stood outside her cabin. The red sun dipped behind the distant mountains, leaving the world cold and sharp. 6 months had passed since Samuel's burial, and in those 6 months, Abigail had learned the heavy truth of life on the frontier. Sympathy faded fast, and loneliness took its place like an unwelcome houseguest. She had fixed fences, mended saddles, and cooked for one at a table built for two. She walked into empty rooms and woke to a bed that felt too wide. The land had taken her husband piece by piece, and now it seemed to be waiting for hers too. She turned to head inside when something moved on the horizon. 2 riders. Dark figures cutting through the last light. Her pulse jumped. Not many people came this far out unless they wanted something. Abigail reached for the Winchester near the doorframe. As the riders drew closer, she saw a tall man on a tired horse. A long coat covered in trail dust hung from his shoulders, and behind him, clinging to his back, was a smaller figure. When they stopped by her gate, the man slid off the saddle, slow and stiff, like someone who'd been riding too long. "Ma'am," he called, tipping his hat. "Sorry to trouble you this late. Name's Nathaniel Blackwood. I was told in town you might be needing a ranch hand." Abigail didn't lower her grip. "Who told you that?" "Fellow at the general store. Said the widow Thornfield was trying to keep her place going alone. Said you wouldn't ask for help, but might not slam the door on it either." That sounded exactly like Henry. Nosy, stubborn, and usually right. "And you just happened to be looking for work?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. My daughter and I have been riding near 3 weeks. We're looking for a place to winter. I can mend, ride, handle cattle, and I don't drink or gamble. You'll get honest work for fair wages." Before Abigail could respond, the small figure slid down from the horse. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, clutching a ragged cloth doll to her chest. Her cheeks were red from wind, her dress worn thin. "Papa," she whispered. "I'm cold." The sound hit Abigail straight in the heart. She thought of the empty rooms in her cabin, the second plate she sometimes set by mistake at supper, the quiet that settled on her shoulders every night. "What's her name?" Abigail asked softly. "Evangeline," Nathaniel said. "But she answers to Evie." Abigail studied them. The man's boots were cracked, his coat patched, but his eyes were steady. The girl looked thin but hopeful, the kind of child who had learned to be strong too early. Abigail let out a slow breath and lowered the rifle. "You can put the horses in the barn. There's hay in the loft. When you're done, come inside. I've got stew on the stove." Relief flickered across Nathaniel's face before he hit it. "We're obliged, ma'am. Truly." Abigail watched them lead the horses away. For the first time in months, the wind didn't make her feel so alone. Inside, she stirred the stew and added a log to the fire. She laid out 3 bowls instead of 1. Her hands hesitated, unsure, but the motion felt strangely natural. A knock sounded sooner than expected. Nathaniel stood there, hat in hand, his daughter beside him, both freshly washed from the pump. "Come in," she said. Evie stepped inside and stared around the warm cabin, firelight dancing across the quilts and shelves of books. "It's pretty," she whispered. "Thank you," Abigail said. "Would you like to help me set the table?" Evie nodded shyly. Her hands trembled as she carried the bowls, careful not to drop them. Soon, the room filled with sounds Abigail hadn't heard in months. Laughter, clinking spoons, soft conversation. Nathaniel ate slowly, like a man used to hunger. Evie barely finished half her portion before sleep tugged at her eyes. "How long since her mother passed?" Abigail asked gently. 4 months, he said, voice rough. "Fever took her. We had a small place in Wyoming, but staying hurt more than leaving." Abigail understood. Loss had its own shape in her chest. "You've been traveling since?" she asked. He nodded. Most folks don't want to hire a man with a child, but leaving her wasn't an option. Abigail reached out without thinking and brushed Evie's hair. There's a small room off the kitchen. Used to be storage. It'll do for 2 bedrolls. Nathaniel looked up, surprised. You're offering us the job? I'm offering you a trial, she said. 2 weeks, $30 a month and board. He held out his hand. You'll have no regrets. They shook on it. No papers, no witnesses, just trust. Abigail lifted Evie in her arms and carried her to the small room. The child wrapped her arms around Abigail's neck in sleepy habit. That tiny trust made something inside Abigail break and mend all at once. When she returned, Nathaniel stood by the fire, face soft in the glow. Thank you, he said quietly. Save it, she replied. You'll earn it come morning. He nodded. How long has it been for you? Quote, 6 months. It gets easier, he said, not easy, just easier. They stood together in silence, 2 people carved out by loss, sharing warmth they didn't know they needed. Outside, the wind moaned across the plains. Inside, the cabin felt alive again. Abigail didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Work, questions, maybe trouble. But for the first time since Samuel died, she wasn't alone. And neither was he. The smell of frying bacon filled the cabin before dawn, warm and rich. Nathaniel woke slowly, blinking up at the low ceiling of the little storage room. For a moment he forgot where he was, until he felt his daughter curled against his side. Safe, warm, under a real roof for the first time in months. He pulled on his boots and stepped into the main room. Abigail was already at the stove, sleeves rolled up, pan sizzling, hair tied back neat and simple. Lantern light caught the gold in her hair. Morning, she said without turning. Coffee's ready. Breakfast will be up soon. He poured himself a cup. The heat felt good in his hands after so many cold mornings on the trail. I can start chores after I eat, he said. Eat first, she told him. Plenty of time for work. Evangeline soon padded in, rubbing her eyes. Abigail smiled warmly. Good morning, sweetheart. Want milk with your breakfast? The child froze. Real milk? Fresh from the cow, Abigail said. Evie glanced at her father. He nodded. She whispered, yes, please. They ate together at the table, 3 people who didn't feel like strangers anymore. Abigail noticed how Evie tucked half a biscuit into her pocket. There's more if you want it, Abigail said gently. You don't have to save food here. Evie looked down. Mama said, never waste anything. She was right, Abigail said softly. But here, you eat until you're full. That's a rule. After breakfast, Nathaniel headed out to mend the corral fence. Abigail took Evangeline to gather eggs. From the fence line, he could see them near the hen house. The widow walked steady and calm, showing the child where to step. Evie giggled at the hens. The sound carried across the yard like sunlight. By midday, the fence stood straight again. Nathaniel wiped sweat from his brow just as Evie came running toward him, holding 2 eggs high with pride. Papa, 12 eggs! And Mrs. Abigail said, I can see the kittens in the barn! Nathaniel chuckled. Sounds like you're busy today. Abigail followed, skirts brushing the grass. She laughed at the child's excitement, then met Nathaniel's eyes. Her smile softened into something warmer. She's a good child, Abigail said. She's all I have left, Nathaniel replied quietly. Everything I do is for her. That evening, the cabin filled with the smell of fresh bread. Abigail let Evie help knead the dough, and flour dusted the table, the floor, even Abigail's cheek. Nathaniel leaned in the doorway watching, something deep in his chest stirring at the sight. You ever bake? Abigail teased. Not since my wife, he said softly. She said bread made the house feel alive. Abigail's smile dimmed but didn't fade. She was right. Supper passed with laughter and quiet warmth. Afterward, Evie begged for a story. Abigail told her one her grandmother used to tell, about a frontier woman who chased off a bear with a rolling pin. The little girl laughed until her eyes watered. Nathaniel watched Abigail across the firelit room. He hadn't seen such peace in years. When the story ended, Evie fell asleep against his arm. Abigail lifted her gently and carried her to bed. Nathaniel watched the door after she left the room, something heavy and tender in his chest. "She's sleeping," Abigail said when she returned. "Thank you," he murmured. "Don't thank me," she said quietly. "You've done more work in a day than most men do in a week." He opened his mouth to reply, but she noticed something in the way he moved. Quiet, steady, alert. "You handle yourself like someone who's seen rougher things than cattle," she said. Nathaniel hesitated, then gave a half-smile. "Used to be a deputy marshal in Kansas." Abigail's eyes widened. "A lawman?" "Was," he said. "Quit after my wife died. Some things you can't keep doing when the light goes out." Abigail's voice softened. "I'm sorry." He stared into the flames. "When you lose someone, the world gets quiet. Too quiet." She stepped closer, the fire warming both their faces. "It stays quiet until someone knocks on your door and reminds you you're still alive." He looked at her, really looked at her. The quiet between them changed, warmed. The next morning, they rode together into the summer pasture and brought the herd down before winter. Work was steady and hard, but the ranch began to look alive again. Smoke rose steady from the chimney. Fences held firm. The animals looked strong. 3 weeks passed, and neighbors began tipping their hats when they rode by. Folks had thought Abigail's ranch was dying. Now it looked stronger than ever. But peace in the West never lasted long. Abigail stepped outside one morning and found 3 riders waiting at her gate. The man in front wore a fine coat and a cold smile. Pike Morrison, the hired gun of Cyrus Hartwell, the richest, meanest land baron in the valley. "Morning, Mrs. Thornfield," Morrison said with a mocking tip of his hat. "Heard you took on help." Quote. Abigail crossed her arms. "What do you want?" "Hartwell's concerned," Morrison said smoothly. "Seems some of your cattle wandered onto his land. 12 head, maybe more." "That's a lie," she said sharply. "We moved them days ago." "So you're calling me a liar?" Nathaniel walked out from the barn, rag in hand, voice calm but cold. "She's saying you're mistaken. Show us the cattle." Morrison's gaze hardened. "And who are you? Just a hand?" "A man who doesn't take kindly to threats," Nathaniel said. A long, dangerous silence settled. Then Morrison leaned closer in his saddle. "Careful, friend. Bad things happen out here. People get lost. Barns burn. Would be a shame if something happened to this place or that little girl peeking from the window." Abigail froze. Nathaniel didn't move, but his eyes turned to iron. "You ever threaten a child again?" he said in a low, steady voice, "and you'll vanish faster than smoke in the wind." Morrison smiled thinly. "We'll see about that." They rode off, leaving dust in the air. Abigail's hands shook. "He meant it," she whispered. "I know," Nathaniel said. "Men like Hartwell don't stop until someone makes them." That night, neither of them slept. Abigail sat by the fire, turning Samuel's ring in her fingers. "Hartwell's wanted this land for years," she said. "He wants our stream, the only one that doesn't freeze in winter." Nathaniel nodded. "Then he won't stop." "But I'm not alone," she whispered. He met her eyes. "No, you're not." The next few days held tension like a storm cloud. Nathaniel rode the fence lines. Twice he found fresh boot tracks. Abigail kept Evangeline close. Then, one night, everything changed. Nathaniel woke to the smell of smoke. He leapt from bed. Abigail burst from her room with Evangeline in her arms. Flames lit the yard outside. The barn was burning. "Stay inside!" Nathaniel shouted. But Abigail didn't listen. She grabbed a bucket and ran. He plunged into the burning barn, fighting smoke and panic. He freed the horses one by one until the last bolted out into the night. He stumbled out coughing. Abigail was throwing water on the fire, trying to keep it from reaching the house. Evangeline stood crying, clutching her doll. By dawn, the barn was gone. Tools, feed, several cattle, everything they needed for winter. "It's all gone," Abigail whispered. Nathaniel found a half-burned torch in the ashes. His jaw tightened. "They did this. Hartwell wanted us to know." "Then what now?" she asked. He looked at her with steel in his eyes. Now we fight back. By noon the next day, riders began appearing on the horizon. 1, then 2, then 6 more. Word had spread fast. Tom Patterson arrived first, his gray beard dusted with trail dirt and worry carved deep into his face. He dismounted and gripped Nathaniel's hand hard. "Hartwell's men again," Patterson said. "No doubt." "None," Nathaniel replied. Patterson's jaw tightened. "Then we don't let it stand. If they'll burn one of us out, they'll burn us all out. Time we stand together." Abigail blinked, holding back tears as other ranchers nodded in agreement. They had all felt Hartwell's pressure for years, each in their own way. But seeing Abigail's barn burned pushed something in them past its breaking point. Men climbed down from wagons carrying lumber, tools, and rope. Women brought bread and strong coffee. Even children helped carry buckets of nails and scraps of wood. By sunset, her yard was filled with people ready to work. Hammers rang long before first light. Sawdust flew through the air. Boards slammed into place. Men shouted measurements, passed beams, laid shingles. Abigail watched it happen with a trembling heart. By nightfall, a brand new barn stood tall and strong, sturdier than the one she lost. When she saw it finished, her voice broke. "I don't know how to thank you." Tom Patterson smiled. "Don't thank us. Thank that fellow of yours. He's the one who rallied us." She turned to look at Nathaniel. He stood near the fence, hat low, shoulders tired. He acted like he wasn't part of the miracle in front of her, but every eye in the yard knew better. And Abigail felt something warm rise in her chest. Something she hadn't felt in half a year. That night, when the last wagon rolled away, she found him sitting on the porch steps with his rifle beside him, the stars bright overhead. "You think they'll stop now?" she asked. "No," he said. "Hartwell's got too much pride. But now he knows you're not alone." She hesitated. "Nathaniel, I don't want you getting hurt because of me." He turned to her, eyes softening in the firelight. "Abigail, I've been running a long time. From trouble. From memories. From myself. But this place, this ranch, it feels like where I'm supposed to stop." Her breath caught. She wished she knew the right words, but her heart beat too loud for thinking. Before she could speak, a small voice came from behind them. "Papa?" Evangeline stood at the doorway in her nightdress, clutching her doll tight. "Are the bad men coming back?" she whispered. Nathaniel stood and lifted her gently. "Not tonight, sunshine." The little girl turned her sleepy eyes on Abigail. "Will you protect Mrs. Abigail too?" "Like you protect me?" Nathaniel looked at the widow, then back at his daughter. "With my life, quote." Evie nodded, satisfied. "Good, 'cause she's our family now." Abigail felt tears sting her eyes. Nathaniel's face changed, not in surprise, but in recognition, as if the child had spoken the truth he already felt. "She's right," he said quietly to Abigail after tucking his daughter back to bed. "We're family now." Abigail took a shaky breath. "Then we protect each other. Whatever comes." He nodded. "Whatever comes." They stood together under the wide Montana sky. The land was still harsh, the threats still real, but for the first time, neither of them faced it alone. In the days that followed, a strange peace settled over the ranch. Nathaniel rebuilt tools by hand. Abigail repaired saddles and checked the herd. Evangeline chased kittens in the barn and followed Abigail like a small shadow. People talked in town. Some said Abigail had hired a drifter. Others whispered she'd found something more. Abigail let them talk. For the first time in months, she felt warmth where grief had lived. One evening, after chores, Nathaniel found Abigail on the hill behind the house, watching the sunset streak the sky pink and gold. He walked up quietly. "Mind if I join you?" "Please do," she said. They stood side by side, the wind cool around them. She glanced at him, taking in the man who had walked into her life with dust on his boots and a child on his hip, not knowing he was walking straight into her heart. He spoke first. "I didn't expect any of this. A home, a future. I didn't expect to feel anything again." Abigail looked down at her hands. "Neither did I." Nathaniel hesitated, then reached out. His calloused fingers brushed the back of her hand. A small touch. but firm enough to say everything words couldn't. She didn't pull away. "Abigail," he said softly, "all things in their time. But if you'll have me, I'd like to build something here. With you, with her, a real life." Her breath trembled, but her voice didn't. "I think," she whispered, "we already started building it." Nathaniel smiled, slow, warm, grateful. He took her hand in his, not asking permission this time. She let him. They stood on that hill until the stars came out one by one, bright and cold above them. Below, the ranch glowed with lamplight. A place rebuilt, a family reborn from ashes, a widowed woman who found strength she thought she lost, a shattered man who found a reason to stay, a little girl who found a home where she felt safe again. Together, they walked back toward the house, toward the warmth, toward the life waiting for them. The land had taken much from them both, but it had given them something rare, a second chance, a home, a family, and love that had quietly rooted itself between them like a seed ready to bloom.